we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. In the still night, whispers float. In the quiet, heartbeats slow. No clash, no roar, just silence. In the shadows, battles won. I see through foggy veils. No swords to raise, no cries to wail. Victory's touching ghostly hue. Darkness glows a pale blue. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. Creeping through the twisted wood, echo shards where warriors stood. Just a breath, just a wish. No more war, no final fist. Wisdom whispers in the night. Strength and peace, no need to fight. Winners walk in soft embrace. No battle scars, no deadly taste. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. In the still night, whispers float. In the quiet, heartbeats slow. No clash, no roar, just silence. In the shadows, battles won. I see through foggy veils. No swords to raise, no cries to wail. Victory's touching ghostly hue. Darkness glows a pale blue. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. Creeping through the twisted wood, echo shards where warriors stood. Just a breath, just a wish. No more war, no final fist.
Alright, good morning everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. This is Alan from Mr. Bitey's Games and Hobbies. And today we're going to be talking about the Lore of the Shattered World, which is our upcoming tabletop RPG. I've got everything pulled up. If my sound or whatever goes out, please let me know if you can't hear me. Hey, how's it going, Super? How you been? Excuse me. Alright, so what you're going to be looking at today is some in-progress stuff. Before we get into the actual lore of the Shattered World, we should talk a little bit about what the setting is, and specifically what we're trying to do. So, one second. Is that any better? How about now? All right. All right. So I will try to keep myself planted and not let my cat play with my microphone. Basically, is what that's telling me. All right. Yes, I get it. I get it. I'm talking and I'm not paying attention to you. That's so horrible. All right. So, like I said, before we begin, I want to talk a little bit about what the game is and one of the issues with lore. So, the Shattered World is, as said multiple times, it's a modern fantasy game. It is set in a different version of our own world. Extremely simply, in modern fantasy, it's a common trope that you've got the modern stuff over here, right? You've got your skyscrapers and your cell phones and your textbooks, and all that is over here on the right. And over here on the left is all your supernatural stuff. And outside of a couple point of view characters, they do not interact. Even going so far in the instance of, say, the Dresden Files, where spellcasters literally mess with technology because of the arcane forces they wield. Tech will just randomly glitch out and go bad around them. That is not the case in the Shattered World. In the Shattered World, from day one, from when humans walked out of the primordial muck, magic has always existed. Now, magic is very bloodline based, so for those of you familiar with games like Dungeons and Dragons, think sorcerer, not wizard. You can't just pick up a book and study and then rip a hole in reality. Doesn't work that way. Alright. So, sound still going okay with everybody? I know I've had a couple people hop on. Thank you, those of you who have hopped on real quick. I appreciate it. Again, if my sound goes out or you can't hear me, please let me know. So, magic has always existed. Magic is very bloodline based. So, if you want to know fireball magic, for example, you better be part of a family lineage that has access to fire magic. That also means that the primary way of learning new magic and getting new magic into your family bloodlines is exactly that. Alright. Alright. Sorry, I'm apparently going Dr. Claw here with my cat on my lap. I'll get you, Gadget. But the world has been very political dynasty, if that makes sense. This also leads to wars that are very... When they happen, they are extremely hot. They tend to be... Let's burn the bastards ASAP, because if we don't, something's gonna happen. But they also tend to be flashes in the pan. Long stretches of status quo, long stretches of what we who grew up in the 80s and 90s would refer to as Cold War. And then, holy crap, there's an invasion. So that's kind of how war works in the Shattered World. The families, I've gone over a little bit before. Again, the families are the ones with the magical lineage. So, I've pulled over a couple different ones just to give you an example. One of the important things that we're doing is the game is called The Shattered World for a reason. One of the things I'm trying to avoid is that late 90s, early 2000s idea of we're going to put out our Asian Adventures book, Oriental Adventures, and it's going to be all about Asian influence. And you played ninja and samurai, and yeah, that's it. That yeah. So one of our key design philosophies for the game. Sorry, one moment, everybody. I just got a thing I had to answer. Alright, sorry about that. Yay, trying to do 18 things at once. So, one of our major design philosophies for the Shattered World was making sure that if I lived in Rochester, New York, or if I lived in Shreveport, Louisiana, or Tucson, Arizona, or Tanzania, Africa, or wherever I live. Hey, Wolf, welcome back. Good to see you again. But wherever I live, I can set a Shattered World adventure in my hometown, right outside my door, if that's what I wanted to do. In doing that, I pulled out a couple different of the family lines that we're working on. These are going to be, again, scattered throughout the world. It's a common trope in movies and literature that, oh no, the aliens are invading. They're going to conquer the world. And by that, I mean New York City and maybe Beijing if we want that market. And that's about it. No. The Shattered World is called the Shattered World for a reason. It is worldwide. The tears can open up anywhere. You may be playing a good old boy, down home Texan yeehaw with a gun, but you can be deployed anywhere in the world where a tear is, because that is your job to take care of. So, the first of the families that I'm gonna just kind of highlight. I also want to say before I slaughter these names, I am a dumb American. I can barely pronounce my name. I am going to be slaughtering these names. I apologize. So, the Vu family. Again, if any of you happen to know how these are actually pronounced, please feel free to correct me. Any of my mistakes, assume they are from ignorance, not malice. But they are a Vietnamese family, currently run by Vu Man Wan. Their specific type of magic is metallurgy. The main family line originally specialized in bronze, but due to other people being brought into the family, the bloodline being changed a bit, they tend to work with most metals and alloys. The family lineage can be traced back to the Lac Viet civilization of ancient Vietnam. And then I tried to pull out 4 different events for each family throughout the years. Some of them are based on events that you would recognize from our timeline. Some of them are based on events that are wholly made up for the Shattered World. So, the Battle of Bac Dong River. Family played a crucial role in defeating the invading forces of the Southern Han Dynasty. Basically, they planted bronze tip spikes in the river at low tide. High tide came up, covered them. The lighter Vietnamese boats were able to skim right over, but the heavier Han Dynasty boats couldn't. And then they used their magic to enlarge and elongate the spikes and basically rip the hell out of the boats. Some of the families no longer exist. The Vu still do. But not every family that I present will. You have the Diop family, currently out of Senegal, Western Africa. And their whole thing is dream magic and divination prophecy. Now, just like any family line, not every... Just like how in the real world, right? Like, I'm really tall. My kid, or my ex-wife, is very tall. My kid is probably going to be tall. But my kid's sister, who had the same parents I do, is not very tall. It happens. Just because you were born into the dream magic and prophecy family does not mean you are going to have dream magic and prophecy abilities. You're more likely to, you're probably going to, and that ability is still locked in your blood, but it is not a guarantee. So, yes, so they aren't born without magic, they're born without the ability to do magic. Again, it's the same way that, say, my daughter ends up being really tall, or being really short, even though both me and my ex are really tall. Her kids still have a chance to be very tall. The genes are still there. Same basic principle. Some things can skip a generation. The last family that I brought out is the Lachance family out of Quebec. Their whole thing is ice and freezing base abilities and alchemical crafting. So again, they were some of the original French settlers in Quebec, and a lot of their history involves the defense of Quebec City, fighting against the British forces during what we Americans know as the French and Indian War, but what most of the world knows as the 7 Years' War. Ignore the fact that that says 1837 and I just talked about the French and Indian War. You get the point. It's really early, I apologize. But that is, yeah, that's the point. So, any questions about the family lines as presented? That is just a rough example. Our current tentative plan is to include 10 or 11 different ones in a small section in the core rulebook. Depending on how things work out and if people are interested, we may end up doing a genealogy style book with, like, here are several of the major families and here are current members, and Bob the flamethrower gave birth to Fred, etc., and art with the family. Basically a lore splat, or a lore book. We are trying to balance between giving the history and not making a bunch of useless stuff for you to buy, if that makes sense. So, Why did I bring up the families? Because in the Shattered World, even now with the enhanced showing up, the families are still basically everything. Throughout the world, or throughout time in the Shattered World, the families have controlled everything. No member of a prestigious family wants to give up the chance to strengthen their own power. No family wants to give up the chance to bring in another minor branch, and then it turns out that gives the family a lot of power, a lot of ability. So, real quick, I'm going to segue for a second. I had somebody ask about subs. So, at this point, the stream is new. I am not able to monetize it yet. I am still trying to figure all of that out. One of the things we have to do is have 7 streams this month, have so many followers. I have to double check how many, and then have average viewers per stream and people interacting. So right now, y'all are helping me, and I appreciate it. Please spread the word of this channel. We are doing more streams. We've got 2 more coming up next weekend. The exact times we're still working on. And then in the future, we're going to be setting up playtests. So if you want to be part of one of these playtests, let me know, and we can work on setting something up. As far as like streams and subbing, once I'm able to do that, I will let everybody know, and I appreciate those of you who have asked. But to get back on, no family wants to give up potential power, right? Because I, as a member of the LeChance family, may not like the Vu family at all, but I don't want to risk the Diop family learning something that I can't counter and then taking me out. A lot of the world, we did a lot of influence from things like the Cold War. I was born in the 80s. The Cold War and oh my god, the Russians and blah blah blah, that was really big in my childhood. We also took a lot of influence from the Japanese Warring States period, the Chinese Three Kingdoms era, a lot of person A versus person B versus person C. They all kind of balance each other until they don't, if that makes sense. So, for the next part of the timeline, we are going to be a little American specific. I do apologize. I know I just went on this whole rant about how it's the world, the Shattered World, blah, blah, blah. Yes. And here's where I get back to what I was saying at the beginning. One of the problems with the lore. There's a very fine line between accurately representing different cultures and peoples and doing a caricature. And we are very much trying to do the former, and not the latter. It's great if you in your home game want to play the Southern Redneck Hick. God knows I've done that myself. I'm friends with a couple of them. It's okay. I've got redneck friends. But, joking aside, it is very different for the official book to have blackface, to put it bluntly. A lot of the time, you have games like, older games like Vampire the Masquerade, their first edition. They very clearly tried to include different cultures legitimately, but 2 boys from suburban Georgia pre-internet do not have the best research capability. And it led to a lot of kind of messed up stereotypes and a lot of perpetuating of views that really shouldn't exist. We very much want to make sure that we give everybody an opportunity to play their home and not play a racist caricature of their home. If that makes sense. So that is one of the major things we're working on. So with that in mind, our timeline. So, again, this timeline, I'm going US-centric for this portion that I'm demonstrating today because I know this is hard to believe, but I am an American. Right? It's what I know. So, one of the big differences in our timeline, in our world, in 1808, the U.S. officially banned the importation of slavery. In the shattered world, through deals, it actually happened 10 years earlier. Basically, when they were doing the Constitutional Convention, they initially came back and said, okay, we're going to kick the slavery issue down the road and we'll address it in 1808. All right, 1803, I think I misspoke. Anyway, in this, they decided to kick it down the road to 1798, which placed it right in the middle of the Haitian Revolution. And they went a slightly different path. This is also when the cotton gin was invented but hadn't taken off yet. So cotton plantations really weren't a thing until cotton became extremely profitable. Slavery in the U.S., most people agreed it was dying out. It just wasn't profitable to purchase to have the amount of slaves you needed to turn a profit. So that's why early U.S. history looked like they were kicking the can down the road, because they kind of were. They were trying to, this is going to die out anyway, so why worry about it? And then the cotton gin came out, cotton became extremely profitable, it became a cash crop, and then slavery exploded because it was much more profitable to hire a slave for a one-time cost, not hire, sorry, I misspoke, to buy a slave for a one-time cost than it was to pay a wage worker. With this, it was banned, and then when slavery became more profitable, when cotton became more profitable, basically what happened was they switched to factory towns, and a form of indentured servitude came back. So, yes, you are not my property, you are not a quote-unquote slave, but you are now in debt to me for $5,000. You're going to earn $3 a day. Also, you have to buy your own food. You have to pay me rent for living on my land, and blah, blah, blah. Very much a mix of factory towns, a little bit of that old school feudal system, and sharecropping from the 1860s, 1870s. Another big thing, American history, the War of 1812, when we fought Britain, the Second American War of Independence, yeah. In our world, it was a draw. That's the nice way of putting it. We gave them a black eye at New Orleans after the war had ended, and they burned down Washington, D.C. We'll call that a draw, apparently. But in the shattered world, the War of 1812 was lost by the U.S. The invasion of Canada failed, just like it did in our world. One of the things that Britain had been planning to do since the American Revolution was the creation of what they called the Indian Barrier State. Basically, it was their native allies giving them land and helping them, or helping to prop up a government for them to act as a buffer zone between Canada and the nascent US. This happened. Let's see if that swaps. Yes, it does. So you can see it here. I'm still learning this system, so please ignore my noobness. But these 3 states may look kind of familiar as 6 different states. They are 3 in this world. While it's hard to see on this map, Maine up here does not actually exist. It is a part of Massachusetts. One of the reasons why certain states exist in our world, right, in American history, was because of the issue of slavery. They tried to balance free states and slave states. Oh, what's that? Missouri wants to come in as a slave state? Well, this area up here of Massachusetts, it's actually called Maine now, and it's its own state, so now we're balanced. What's that? Texas wants to come in as 3 different states? No. It can come in as 1 state, but we're also going to have this other state come in here as a free state to balance it out, etc., etc. One of the things a lot of people don't know, the Yucatan in Mexico in the 1840s tried to join the United States as a state. This area down here. The vote actually made it to Congress, and they failed by 1 vote. One of the reasons why they failed is because it would have come in as a slave state, as a southern state, and they didn't want to disrupt the balance. There were some other reasons as well, but that was one of the major ones. Well, in the shattered world, again, slavery isn't a thing. It's been replaced by this factory town indentured servitude. So the Yucatan joins in 1847. 1846, the Mexican-American War begins. Prior to that, the Republic of Quebec formerly leaves Canada. It joins the United States. The Mexican-American War goes just how as it did in our timeline, and largely becomes a puppet government. 1870, the Indian Barrier State joins the U.S. Now, some of this may seem weird. Like, why am I talking about these things that were anti-American or created anti-American? Why did they join the U.S.? Well, early United States history was incredibly expansionistic. Manifest Destiny, From Sea to Shining Sea. Taking over North America and more was always in the cultural zeitgeist of the time. Here, in our timeline, it was largely done through war. A lot of very brutal wars against the Native Americans. In this, while that still happens, a combination of very powerful families wanting to keep a lid on things, combined with a lot of political shenaniganry, led to basically the utilization of puppet governments earlier in this timeline. So we're not going to take over Mexico, but the Mexican government is now friendly with us. We accidentally got rid of their rulers because they were bad, and put in rulers that will do what we say. So yeah, they're not part of us, but they're going to give us favorable trade deals, and they're going to do what we say. And a lot more diplomacy. A lot more of, sure, you can join, we'll let you be a U.S. citizen, and then we're just kind of slip in more and more of our people, and then you're going to get voted out. A whole lot of that happens. And then, yes, there were more wars. Again, I mentioned earlier, flash in the pan. World wars happen. They happened a lot in our timeline as well. Even the ones that weren't called world wars. I know, right? It's hard to believe. When you have people that can summon howitzers, why would there be more wars? Don't more guns make everything more safe? Anyway, not gonna rant, but yes, a lot of flash in the pan wars. A lot of I'm gonna fight to gather this scrap of land right here because that was our homeland thousands of years ago and we want it back, but we're not going to really push further than that. We're going to take it, we're going to say it's ours, you can fight back, but we're willing to let it go right here. And then 20 years later they do the same thing to us. Think, for those of you familiar with European history, think of areas like Alsace and Lorraine. That area between France and Germany that changes hands every 20 minutes. So, the U.S., going through, the Dominion of Canada is founded in 1871. The IBS, the Indian Barrier State, becomes 3 different states. You have Algonquin, which is this state here. You have the Haudenosaunee. In our timeline, it's the Iroquois Confederacy, is what we as Americans know them more as. They originally came from up here in, upstate New York in the area. After the American Revolution, they migrated. Some of them moved up into Canada proper. Others moved down into what we know as Ohio and Michigan. And then I always slaughter this one, the Menominee. Yay, words I can't pronounce. Love doing these style games. They were Minnesota, Upper Michigan, and Wisconsin, that area. So very Midwest Native Americans. Down here, this area taking up parts of Texas, parts of New Mexico, etc., was the area of Comancheria. Basically, the areas claimed by the Apache, the Comanche, and those native tribes. In our timeline, a lot of historians have begun recognizing them as an official, if short-lived, empire from roughly 1750 to 1850. In the Shattered World timeline, they were, and there was a lot of interaction and respect between them and certain individuals such as Sam Houston, who was able to more successfully in the Shattered World broker a peace deal. That is not to say that there were not native wars and there were not events, but in the Shattered World, the early US, while still being incredibly expansionistic, relied less on war and more on deal making. Basically, let's bring them into the family. (1898) into the early 1900s, the Golden Circle. For those of you familiar with Southern American history, that was basically a plan to make the Caribbean an American playground. That was a plan to take over the Haitian plantations, the fields in the Dominican Republic, basically the entire Caribbean under American influence 100%, even more so than in our timeline. With the joining of the Yucatan and with others, this comes into fruition after the Spanish-American War in 1898. I see we're up to 10 people now. Welcome. For those of you that missed the beginning of our stream, this is going over the lore of an upcoming tabletop RPG, The Shattered World. This is a standalone 2D12 based system. We will be in the future. As soon as I say that, we go from 10 people to 8 people. Don't like the standalone systems. I get it, guys. I understand. But joking aside, this is a standalone system. This is not part of D&D or Pathfinder or anything like that. This is our own unique setting, our own unique system. We do have other streams on that do, or that go over mechanics and that, if you want to check it out and you're interested. So, what we know as the First World War, the Great European Disaster, as it's known in the Shattered World, does happen roughly the same time. The big difference is North America and most of South America stays neutral. There was no Zimmerman telegram because, there really wasn't a Mexico. There was officially. The Pan American Conference in 1917, extremely long story short, in our timeline, that was a attempt to unify more of South America in the same way that North America is unified in an overarching United States. In our timeline, nothing really happened. In the Shattered World, it was much more successful. It leads to more cooperation between the Brazilian Republic and smaller South American countries, though no official annexation yet. 1929, the Great Depression does still hit. It is not as bad. However, socialism does begin to surge throughout the world and in the U.S. It's largely put down because of the families. Again, their grasp on power is much more firm in the Shattered World, much more autocratic. The Shattered World never really left that, I don't want to say feudal system, but it very much never left that feudal system. Yes, we have a democracy. We can vote in new people. Do you want to vote in Bob of the House LeChance or Frank of the House LeChance? Because that's who's running. And whether you vote for Bob or Frank, you're going to get the LeChance family. The idea of a stateless society is, again, it's a pipe dream in this world. Even more so than ours. Why would a stateless world exist in this world? Because again, it's not the government that has the power. The US government can make rules, sure. But if enough of the leading families in the US say, no, we're doing this instead, the government is going to change its tune. Power is very autocratic. Does that make sense to everybody? So, obviously, the time continues into modern day. Before I get to modern day, specifically the last few years before the official games start, does anyone have any questions about what I've gone over? I'll give just a minute for people to organize their thoughts. Do, 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 do. All right. So, if you do have any questions, again, please don't hesitate to ask. I will answer them as quick as I can see them. Moving on to modern times. And welcome to those who just joined. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining. Moving on to modern times. The game will start. I need to stop looking at the number of the people in the stream because every time I acknowledge that more people have joined, they all leave. So, I didn't want to acknowledge you anyway. Joking aside, when in modern times, so the official game start is going to be in 2022, 5 years before the games start. An event happened known as the Night of Screams. So this event happened. Extremely long story short, an organization known as the Morning After, which is a professional mourning company. Mourn spelled like to mourn someone. MOURN. They're basically exorcists, and we will go over more of them at our organization deep dive. No one knows precisely what happened this night, but this is when the first tear appeared. When this tear appeared, it sent a shockwave in the immediate area, and multiple people lost their magic. So when you are exposed to a tear, you can become an enhanced. Enhanced is a player character. An enhanced can safely go through a tear. An enhanced gains different abilities that are not bloodline based. However, if you become enhanced, you are cut off from magic as it is understood in the Shattered World. You could have been this reality's version of Gandalf and Voldemort and Harry Dresden and insert generic wizard-based character here, all thrown into a blender. You're enhanced? I'm sorry, you're a level 1 peasant, deal with it. You have no magic. You can still utilize some rituals and some items, but that's it. After this first tear appeared, others began appearing throughout the world. Some of them are large enough to walk through, some of them are large enough to drive through, some of them are the size of a golf ball. Worse, just like how if I get sick, right? Like I catch the cold. So that is a very interesting question, and I will answer that in 1 minute time, because that is a very important question. So, just like how if I get sick, right? Like I catch a cold, I am contagious a little bit before I start showing symptoms, right? Tears operate in the same way. Before you see a tear open, it's giving off its reality warping radiation before it's shown. Again, this can make you enhanced, but it cuts you off from magic. In a world where everything revolves around magic and family ties, and being able to pass on those ties, what does it mean to suddenly have no magic? Very, very bad things. The reason why the event was known as the Night of Screams, and the first year after was known as the Terrors, is because, again, there was fear. Imagine for a minute that you are the patriarch of a family, or the matriarch of a family, and you have had a generations long squabble with another family, and then a tear opens in your pool house, and the heir to your family is now enhanced. What was originally called infected, right? They now have no magic. They are now useless to the family. Because again, the powers of the enhanced weren't discovered at first. It wasn't like the X-Men in comics where I hit puberty, I wake up, and I'm shooting laser beams out my eyes. The powers didn't show up immediately, if that makes sense. So, imagine now, your heir just lost their powers. Now there's a rumor going along that family you've been in squabbles with for generations has the ability to open tears. They have the ability to maybe not create tears, but move them and choose where they open. What does that do to society? What does that do to your family? A lot of fear. A lot of oh crap. A lot of mob violence in the initial year. After that, it was discovered that the Enhanced did have some powers, and the largest organization of the families, known as the Ardor of the White Eye, basically magical Illuminati, moved to get the Enhanced recognized as a type of magic. So, to answer your question, Time, in a very roundabout way, yes and no. That is something that's very character specific. There are merits in the game to represent. I am a member of X family. I still have these connections. There are drawbacks that are, nope, I am shunned, dirty leper, unclean. So, can you keep your nepotism? Maybe. Hopefully. Does that make sense to everybody? So, one of the important things, cool. This event, the Night of Screams, according to rumors, the founders of the morning after were going after what they thought was a demon, known as the Christmas Lady. The Christmas Lady is very much an urban myth. Think, in today's terms, think a Slender Man, or going back a bit to my childhood, something like Bloody Mary or Candyman, right? Say Bloody Mary in the mirror 3 times, they appear. The Christmas Lady is a woman covered in red and green wild tattoos. They subtly change with everybody who's claimed to have seen her, but they're always similar. And she basically snatches kids. Those that are being bad, those that aren't listening to their parents. It's your standard boogeyman myth. Supposedly, the morning after stopped her. That is the claim by Sarah, the founder of Morning After, the only surviving founder. And yeah, there are rumors lately that this Christmas lady has been seen again. That is where the game is going to be opening for the meta-narrative. As far as monsters in general, again, this is something that we will go over more in the adversary stream next week. But monsters, supernatural, those have always existed. Most of them have been hunted out of existence. So think, yeah, everybody knows what a chupacabra is. They died around the same time passenger pigeons or the dodo went extinct. Things like that. There are skeletons that have been found that make people believe dwarves and elves once existed, but the scientific community is divided on, were these a separate race, or are they basically Homo africanus or Neanderthal, etc.? Were they a different species of human? Were they a different species? We don't know. No one has seen an elf or a dwarf or any one of the other fantasy races in centuries. They're largely considered, if they existed, they're extinct now. The adversaries, the different fantasy monsters, be they the Babao from Lithuanian and Eastern European myth, be they the Lian, which is the Chinese-style dragon, be they the Zeme, which is a Russian-style dragon, etc. Those had been slowly dying out as well. However, with the appearance of the tears, they have made a sudden comeback. No one knows if the tears are creating them, if they're coming through the tears, or if they were always there and they're just being drawn out by the tears, right? Like a moth to light. No one knows. And that is going to be one of the main mysteries of the meta-narrative when the game launches. What are these tears exactly? What are the enhanced exactly? Why are the monsters making a comeback? Is this something we can profit off of? Is this something we have to nuke? Can these tears be sustained long term? These are all the great mysteries that comes out. There's also one more thing I want to go over for the tears themselves. If you look on the left of the thing I have pulled up, you're going to see, I'm not going to go too far in depth because that's something we're still working on. And it's just not ready to show. But you'll see the Afterlife, Avernus, Circles of Infernum. I wanted to explain those a little bit. So, in the Shattered World, a tear... So, there is a handle animal style skill that can work towards taming adversaries, yes. There will be basic rules for that. That is something we are probably going to introduce but fully flesh out in a later book. One of the difficulties of a core rule book is making sure that we include everything that allows you to play the game, but not overwhelming. Right now, even without a full Pokemon style minigame, we're already looking at about a 600-page book, which does put us equivalent to your Dungeons and Dragons and your Pathfinders. However, we don't want to make a 900-page tome that we have to charge a stupid amount to break even on, and then no one can play the game. We need to try and balance that, include everything, but include enough to make it practical, if that makes sense. But to get back, each tear opens to a different pocket dimension. The vast majority of pocket dimensions That's right. And they are blocked and reported. Sorry for the sudden silence, guys. Click. Done. And banned. Sorry for the delay. Or, God, delay. Sorry for the delay. And thank you, Tilia. Welcome to the chat. And yes, Time and Super, y'all are the best viewers. And not just you two, all of you are the best viewers. Thank you, everyone. So, to get back to where I was, yay, distractions. Again, you're going to see over here different names. Each pocket dimension, or each tear opens to its own pocket dimension. As soon as people realized that, rumors began bumping around of people opening a tear to heaven, or opening a tear to Shangri-La, or opening a tear to purgatory. That there will be rules for something like that in the game. That being said, the vast, overwhelming majority of tears open to separate pocket dimensions, their own thing. The ability to go through a tear to reach heaven, for example, is something that should be the goal of an entire story, right? Like, that should not be, okay, day one, game one, we're opening and we're going to purgatory, say hi to Dante for me. That should be something where your characters have spent years and gone through multiple tears to reach that end goal, if that makes sense. And then again, just like how the Babao, for example, is different in each culture that it's a part of, this dimension, or this tear taking you to quote-unquote heaven, may be a little different from this other tear that takes you to quote-unquote heaven. There's no guarantee they're both the same heaven. There's no guarantee that is quote unquote the heaven. In the official storyline, tears to known named alternate dimensions are going to be extremely rare, mostly the stuff of myth, the stuff of rumor and legend. In your home game, as I've said before, it's your home game. Do what you want. You've paid me for my book at that point. You're more than welcome to do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not going to come to your home and smack your wrist for not playing the way I said you should play. But does that make sense to everybody? I know, especially once you start talking about things like purgatory and the afterlife and heaven, a lot of people get very up in arms. The goal is not to play that kind of simulator. I thought about it, but bounty hunters are expensive, and frankly, I like money more than they do. I'd rather keep it to myself. It was on the table, though. We did have many long discussions. So, any questions about what I've gone over so far? Anything about the tears? Any questions in general? Yeah, what's up? You should know the Jeopardy theme song is playing in my head right now. No, world hopping was not a thing. These tears very much represent a gold rush. Once it was discovered that you could stabilize them and go through them. Prior to that, this world was this world, and that was it. Sure, some people have claimed to visit other worlds in their dreams, and some people have claimed to reach heaven in an out-of-body experience, but that's not something that was ever confirmed or proven. And frankly, when you have access to magic, you can say all sorts of things that can't be proven. So no, officially, world hopping was not a thing. This world was very much cut off from other worlds, if that makes sense. Yes. So all of the tear-based stuff, the tear-based rituals, the tear-based equipment, the enhanced themselves, all came into being 5 years ago. So, again, in our world, it's 2014. The first tears, again, yes, absolute chaos. That's why it was known as the Night of Screams. The first tears, the first enhanced, weren't even known as enhanced back then. That name has only come around the past 2 years. They were originally known as the Infected. Because, again, you could have been the magic guy, and now all of a sudden, you're cut off from your birthright. You don't have access to that anymore. The first research papers and the first academic discussions about the tears were all in terms of this plague, this disease. Exactly. For those of you who have not seen the previous streams, a lot of the powers are very subtle and very easily missed. Things like the lover's destiny has an ability where they can grant themselves and an ally a bonus to agility. Awesome, right? Very handy mechanically, but you're not sprouting wings. You're not creating a fireball or pointing a finger laser at somebody, right? It's very low key. A lot of the especially low level destiny abilities are like that. Now, the higher level ones, absolutely, some of them are more flashy, we'll say. But those are higher level ones, and you're not going to get those at character creation. So, yes, very good question. Another thing to discuss. The tears themselves, I used the term gold rush earlier, and that's very much true. Again, the Shattered World has been one that's been largely locked in that kind of oligarchy, feudal world for generations. And yes, there are flash in the pan fires, but nothing really changes. Right, exactly. Exactly. If you're not actively using it, or if you're not used to doing something like that, being a little more agile isn't something that's gonna, oh crap, I must have this new rare magic that nobody knows about. Especially when the word going around is, this is a disease that stops you from using magic, right? Like, this is a magical contagion. These things, initially, people weren't even sure. So, say, for example, a tear opens, right here in my house, and I become infected. And then, super, I walk over and shake your hand. You're nowhere near that tear. Did I just infect you? No one knows. No one knows. Now in world they do. No, it's exposure to a tear, not exposure to an enhanced that makes you enhanced. But initially, no one knew. But going through a tear. So again, this world is one that has been locked in stasis. That very oligarchy, families matter, family lineage matters, nothing else matters mindset for eons. With these tears opening up, the ability to go through a stabilized tear to this land that nobody owns and make a new start is incredibly attractive to a lot of people. If your only real magic is I can point at my cell phone and levitate it off the table slowly about 5 feet, and that's my quote unquote gift of telekinesis, but I can go through this tear, maybe lose it, probably lose it, but now I'm in this area where the status quo is gone, where there's potential resources that we can get our hands on, where the government doesn't exist and the families don't yet exist. That's incredibly attractive to a lot of people. There are a lot of people that are absolutely willing to take that risk to become an enhanced. That's one of the reasons why, of the 3 main modes in gameplay, the third mode is settlement building. Stratagem mode, which leads directly into settlement building. Oh, absolutely. I don't want to spoil too much because that will be the subject of some early lore and some early beginner box quest lines and the like, if that makes sense. But you're absolutely right. Once it was discovered, So the first enhanced that was recognized as an enhanced was somebody fleeing a mob. They jumped into a car to try and escape and realized it was broken, right? Like wires ripped out of the steering column. They figured, well, that's it. I'm about to be, killed. No, they would never do that. Um, yes, so almost every major family has at least one member who was infected. Um, Again, these tears can open anywhere. There have been stories of tears opening in people's bedrooms for only a few minutes and then closing. Not even lasting long enough to be stabilized. No one knows what these tears are. They've begun to figure out how they work on people and items, but a lot of the submissions that Enhanced are going to be getting in the beginning stage in the first book are going to be things like, after you stabilize this tear, I want you to bring the resonance objects back here for study. Okay, a tear opened here at this shopping mall. I want you to rescue as many of the civilians as you can and bring them here. That's fine. My brain cuts off my own stories all the time. So, back to the broken car story. The person, hopped in the car, realized it was broken, figured they were, dead. They were being chased by a mob, and subconsciously used their powers, the chariot destiny, and empowered the car for a minute, turned it on. And the car from the outside was obviously broken. The infected, the enhanced that hopped in was panicking and not paying attention, which happens when you're being chased by a bunch of people. But everybody just saw this obviously broken car start and begin to move. And holy shit, that means they have magic. Something is going on. I'm not going too far into that story because that will be one of the intro into the world stories in the core rulebook. But that was the first. Maybe we were wrong about them being infected. Maybe there's something else. When it was discovered that they had other magic that didn't seemingly rely... Oh, excuse me. When it was discovered that they had other magic that seemingly didn't rely on bloodlines, that is when the enhanced moniker was introduced. No one knows who first introduced it. It's just one of those things that I heard it on TV and it just kind of filtered in. You will see some people still referring to enhanced as infected in game. That's a good way of seeing their attitude. Enhanced is the official nomenclature now. Infected is more of a slur, if that makes sense. Absolutely, a lot of the magical families very much pushed for them to be called enhanced, and absolutely a lot of those same families are still spreading, like you said, Super Destructo, bigotry and fear about the enhanced. We can't make that. Obviously, somebody of power did. What are they gonna do next? Are these enhanced actually some sort of sleeper cell army? I bet they are. Etc., etc. So, I like that question. Any more questions? All right, I'm going to give you guys just 30 more seconds, and then if there are no questions, I'm going to move on. Awesome. I mean, you joke, but in an environment where fear is already saturating the area, sometimes that's all it takes. It sucks, but sometimes that's all it takes. So that actually does, because my mind works the way it works, that does lead to an interesting point. When you create your character, you choose your culture and occupation for your character, right? Your culture is the way they were raised, and your occupation is what they do for a living. One of the occupations and cultures is athlete. When you have family lines that can summon the very wind below them to propel them forward, steroids suddenly don't seem like a huge thing. So, in the athletic community, various performance enhancing rituals and, yes, performance enhancing substances still exist in the Shattered World. Now, those will probably not be in the core rulebook. Yeah. But from a lore and background perspective, when you're making your character, if you're making someone who is a MMA fighter raised by baseball players, for example, they've probably seen a lot of that kind of thing. Just something to keep in mind for when you're designing your characters. Alright, so at this point, I was originally going to have the stream run till noon. Unfortunately, I am starting to kind of lose my voice. Yay, temperature changing, and 'tis the season. So, excuse me. For next week, we are still working on the exact times of when the two streams will be. They will most likely be Saturday and Sunday at 10 a.m., same as this week. Saturday and Sunday, one of them will be our organization deep dive. That's where we're going to go in depth into the morning after, what kind of people they recruit, what they traditionally do, a little bit of their backstory, that kind of thing. We're going to go over Starlight Networks, we're going to go over the Ardor of the White Eye, etc., etc. The other day is going to be our adversary files walkthrough. Basically, that is where we're going to go through and look. Here is what the adversaries are. Here is how the system works. Here's how you can create your own adversaries for your game, etc., etc. Specifically for the adversary handbook, one of the things we are doing is, again, for those of you familiar with the OGL line of games, right? Your D&D 3.0, your D&D X, your Pathfinder, you're used to, here's my core rulebook and here's my bestiary, and I need to buy both. When the game launches, we will have the core rulebook, the Shattered World core rulebook, and we will have the adversary handbook. That being said, the basic rules and a couple examples of adversaries will be in the core rulebook. Now, the adversary handbook will greatly expand upon that. And obvious conflict of interest, I would say, is necessary, but if you're just looking to test out the game and don't want to buy multiple books, you can theoretically play with just the core rulebook. But we will be going over that this weekend as well. They will be posted on our Facebook page. Again, facebook.com/MrBites. And then we will be updating what day is what. So, any questions on that for me? Otherwise, again, I'd like to thank everybody that stopped by and chatted. I greatly appreciate it. It was good seeing you all here. It was good discussing things. Otherwise, I will see you all next week. Keep an eye on our Facebook page. And talk to y'all later. Be safe, everybody.